of being a nobody. On Tuesday night.
I haven't heard anything. So.
You just keep showing up until they kick you out.
Ashley.
No news is good news.
He's one of the cool kids now. He's in the back. Your name tag's there.
You'll be up here soon.
All right. Okay, now. We're gonna spend this. So. Oh. Stephanie, do you want to hit your mic?
Okay. Good evening. This will be the start of the Transportation Advisory Board for April 14th, 2025. Can we get a roll call, please?
Chair Lehner.
Here.
Board Member Bennett.
Here.
Board Member Wickland.
Here.
Vice Chair McKee-Burrows. Board Member McInerney.
Here.
Board Member Kalkofer.
Here.
Council Member Yarborough.
Great, thank you. And we acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the first people have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. Okay, we'll move on to approving the minutes of the preceding meeting in February, since we did not have one in March. Are there any questions or corrections to the minutes from the February 10th meeting?
Yes, minor correction. In line or item 4, bold line, Bennett is spelled with 2 T's, as well as it's all good. It's common. And then also on the very bottom line, as well as in one other occasion on below 10.
Okay. Any other? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll motion to approve the amended minutes for February 10th, 2025.
Seconded.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Phil, we'll move to number 5, communications from staff.
Great, thank you. So Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the city. Just wanted to let you know a few things that are coming up, specifically with Vision Zero Task Force. We did have a meeting, I guess it was almost a couple of weeks ago now, where we had almost 30 community members showed up and pre-tested various community engagement techniques. Our next meeting is planned for June 5th. From 6 to 7:30 at the Longmont Senior Center. So the agenda will be the Vision Zero Action Plan development, the timeline, funding, and support. And so those things will be happening with that. Our award for the Vision Zero Action Plan is still on pause with the federal government looking at those. Found out this last week with our lobbying trip that there's 3,269 applications being held up right now for re-review. So I think ours is one of those, and so hopefully with limited staff, the USDOT will be able to re-review those fairly quickly. So we'll see how that goes. If not, we will reapply, so that will happen also. Are there any questions with Vision Zero? 3,269. Or over 3,200 is that they'd usually say. But
Did you all come up with a new name?
I don't think we did. No.
No, it's still ongoing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's still all over the place. But good question. I did want to also, go ahead.
Phil, are there any other city grant awards that have been lost or paused that we should know about?
I'm only focusing on transportation. I believe there have been some other ones in other categories that have been paused, at least, and possibly lost. And I don't know. I don't know what those are, but I do know with the transportation piece, we're in pretty good shape, except for that one. That's really the one we're keeping our eye on, and we're trying to fly under the radar with everything else. We've got a consolidated railroad infrastructure and safety. I can't remember what the I stands for, but maybe these RTD guys know. But there's a CRISI grant, KRISI grant, that we're keeping a close eye on for front range passenger rail, and it's a CDOT grant. And so we were asking a lot of questions about that in DC as well last week. So trying to keep our eye on that one also. But so far, fairly good news. We do know that the Negoose dollars are moving through the process with the FTA. So that $1 million for microtransit is slated to start coming online in June of 2026. So we're excited about that. And I think there's still a check in that door behind Mr. McNary. The giant check is behind there somewhere. Right. That's what we have to watch out for. Somebody needs to endorse that thing.
Well, I guess I don't want to make a commentary, but I know Sean Duffy, the new transportation secretary, did make a mention that they don't want to fund any bicycle-related infrastructure. So is Vision Zero viewed as bicycle infrastructure by the federal government that you know of?
I don't believe ours is worded in quite that way. It's about safety for bicyclists, pedestrians, and people in vehicles as well. So it's about more of the overall road safety. So we've tried to avoid some of that specific language. So again, we'll see. Another item that we just always like to make you aware of, and I think this is great for our RTD friends in the audience as well, is the service operation on the microtransit. So as of today, if we start in December 9th and move all the way to today, we've had 21,411 completed rides through yesterday, I should say. The demand rate that we meet is about 91%. Our wait times are going up slightly, so we're starting to look at the idea of possibly increasing the number of vehicles. So that's going to be an additional cost. So this is where those dollars from the federal government really play a key role. And we'll want to talk to our RTD friends a little bit too about some services that they provide currently that may be very close in nature to our microtransit, and if there's any way to talk about how we could not duplicate services and maybe utilize funding in a different way. But anyway, those are for later discussions. Those are things that we'll have at the staff level as well, the discussions. But I just wanted to let you know we're doing really well, and almost too well. So we're well, we don't want people to wait too long. The service will suffer as people start to wait 20, 30 minutes. And so we're really trying to make sure, keep people happy. But
All about communication is how we communicate it.
Yep.
That's all.
Okay.
Phil, is there any surveys on the completions, or do we send them any feedback surveys to see how we're doing?
We do for the completed rides, and so they basically fill out a 5-star piece or a 5-star category, and they give them, I should say, via transportation services, not via mobility. They give them feedback, and so our average star rating is 4.9 of the completed rides. But I don't get feedback from the people who don't take the ride because they didn't get it satisfied or taken care of. So if they don't get their ride, and I've had that happen where it's like, well, I'm not going to wait 30 minutes, so I just opt out, and I don't get to say anything about how I feel about that. So those are things I think everybody's kind of experienced that on the board. I know a few of you have mentioned those items. So, but so far the completed rides have been pretty great, and the feedback has been great, and the drivers are getting some really good feedback as well. We've had a few issues I think that made next door about drivers maybe speeding or doing U-turns in the middle of the streets, and so we're addressing that through the vendor. But otherwise, things have been good, and I think we'll hear from RTD that we've got some good ridership numbers on, especially like the 324. I think it's starting to feed off of the idea that people may take it microtransit in one way and maybe use other transit means, especially with free transit on our 300 series buses. They may be using that, but we'll hear about that either way. So that's all I have from staff. Unless Jim has something, Jim's kind of hiding in the back.
Phil, I got one. I got one question.
Okay.
Obviously there's funding to find for another vehicle. Is there also maybe talks of extending hours past 8 p.m.? Because I always like to joke about this board of we end at 8 and we can't get home
Right.
via bus
Well,
or,
unless you start,
or microtransit.
unless 10 minutes before, 15
Yeah,
minutes
yeah.
before, you guys
Yeah,
are on
yeah.
your phones,
Yeah.
getting it all set up.
Yeah.
They will operate slightly after 8 o'clock, which is kind of nice, but
Okay.
it's not something we advertise. We have talked about that, but right now we're trying to fill that gap of just trying to get the
lowering wait
service.
times.
Yeah, just the times that we have currently. If there was an issue we thought there might be an issue with gaps in service, demand during parts of the day, and that we could move and maybe slow it down during certain parts, take drivers off, and then move them to some outside hours if that was more in demand. But right now we're just seeing demand all day. We'll get you some more information as we do the next round. I think we're going to wait 6 months. So in June or July, we'll have another report for you and show you the heat maps that have been created that really show you where the rides are starting from and ending.
Okay,
So
cool.
those are interesting. But RTD did this for us a number of years ago, and it's the same. Its origins are all over the place, destinations are all over the place. And so that's one of the issues with providing transit in Longmont.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we will move on to public invited to be heard. Do we have any members of the public here to be heard? And I do see somebody.
Hey, I'm Ross Starrett. I live at 2161 Steel Street. And kind of what I wanted to talk about today is, as board member Wickland mentioned, the atrocious timing of our bus system. Like, I cannot take a bus home from this meeting. No one can be civically engaged and rely on the buses here. It's kind of atrocious. I wrote down the last time for every single bus in the network. So 323, the last bus out is at 5:30 p.m. on weekdays. 324, it is 8:30 for the last outbound at 8th and Bross, going northbound, and 8 p.m. going south. 326, 7 p.m. And 327, it is 6:30 p.m. Bolt does better, as we know it's a regional service that gets a full schedule from RTD. The last northbound is at 1:16 a.m. That's fantastic, and 11:30 p.m. for southbound towards Boulder. LD, we see also it runs a little later, but it also runs so infrequently that it's not something that people look at, and it also, I think, doesn't often go past 8th and Bross. Saturdays, pretty much everything is 5:30 or 6:30 p.m. And on Sunday, we only have 324 running locally. And so, like, most of Longmont's area, and I know that there's a lot of apartments not in that main and 119 corridor, most of Longmont doesn't have bus service on Sundays, and it's hourly on the weekends. It's really bad. A comment on the microtransit. I used it on Saturday to get home from downtown because, I was just missed a bus. Well, the half-hour wait on the microtransit's less than the hour wait for a bus. So that's nice. It's a nice option to have, and they have bike racks, so it's great. So I want to meet up with someone downtown. I can take my bike. I can take the ride back if I want to. Or if things time out nice, I can grab a bus, but, maybe not. Those are really what I wanted to say. And I'd love to see, transit run later in the evening, and maybe Longmont won't be so car dependent because people think, oh, this is a viable option for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the information items. And that would be the 2025 RTD update. Correct, Phil?
Yeah, with that, I will just introduce, we have a number of folks from the Regional Transportation District, RTD, here tonight. And we'll start with Chris Quinn.
Good evening, Chris Quinn. I'm a project manager in the planning department. Thank you for having us to go over, I guess, pretty much anything RTD this evening. We have we have a group of people here on the slide. You see on the left, everybody's here. I won't go bother to introduce everybody and waste your time on that, but anybody who is up speaking, we will obviously introduce them. Then on the right side of the slide, you see the topics that we will be covering tonight. We'll be going over fairly extensively the current fixed route services as well as the special services. A little bit of update on what we're doing with future planning for our services, our system optimization plan, as well as a construction update on Colorado 119, and then closing off with an update on the status of the Northwest Rail. And with that, we will be doing kind of a tag team effort tonight, so I'm going to hand it off to Greg, who will give you the update on the fixed route services.
Thank you. Good evening. Greg Filkin, Service Planner Scheduler for the North team. Our boundaries are basically north of I-70 in the RTD district. And thanks for having us and allowing us to present this information. So, this button here? Okay. What I'm presenting here is the average daily boardings by route for the fall run boards. So this have been run boards that started in August or September. And as you can see, this year on our regional stuff, we did pretty good. The Bolt was up considerably. Some of the locals are down slightly. Compared to 2023, couple of things going on there. We have Kaufman Street shut down. We don't know how much that's affecting, people being able to meet. It has messed with the schedules somewhat. And so, but it's, we're going to monitor that. I don't think it was anything related to the microtransit because microtransit started. Yeah. Microtransit started after the fall run board, so I don't think it was a case of microtransit cannibalizing the local routes, but we'll monitor that and we'll keep an eye on it. And this is just a different format. You can see how we have, over the last few years, we quit taking pre-pandemic numbers this year and comparing them because it's just, we're so far past that now that's not even, worth bringing up. And then here's our locals where you can see that we are down slightly. It's not anything too concerning, just something we're monitoring as far as on that ridership. And real quick, since you're here, I will address a couple of issues on that local. We have proposed, now everything's got to be approved by the board. There's a couple of routes here locally that we are extending past, we've proposed to extend past 7 p.m., where we would be adding a couple trips in to address those types of concerns. So with that, I'm going to hand it off over to Sage, and he can go over the...
Thank you, Greg. Hello, everyone. My name is Sage Thornbrew. I am the Senior Alternative Service Planner Scheduler at RTD. Today we're going to talk about paratransit and FlexRide. So first of all, addressing paratransit. For those of you who are unfamiliar, it is a service that is provided within 3/4 of a mile from fixed route services and is available within the same schedule as fixed route services are. You need a disability that prevents you from using fixed route service in order to be able to use it, and to be eligible to use it, that has to be determined in advance of your using the service. 2024, the utilization of the services, we're looking at an average of 1,100 trips per month in Longmont, and that accounts for 3% of the system-wide trips within RTD. The Longmont FlexRide, currently as it is structured, runs Monday through Friday, 5:30 to 7, Saturday 9 to 6, and Sunday also 9 to 6. The boundaries are, as you see here. Our in-service hours have gone up, not since 2023, but we did make that big jump between 2022 and 2023, where we have 2 vehicles on the weekday and 1 vehicle on Saturday and Sunday both. We're seeing a pretty significant gradual increase of weekday boardings. Anecdotally, Longmont right now has, it's one of our highest performing routes within the FlexRide system. I think, kind of like you guys have been talking about, one of the things, like Phil was saying, that makes Longmont such a good area for FlexRide and microtransit service is that there are so many people who live in so many different places, who are going so many different places, and that's why typically you'll see a service like this do really well, especially when combined with fixed route services. Typically, I think people tend to think of FlexRide as something that is thrown in to an area where a fixed route service doesn't work. From my perspective, where it works best is when that's combined with fixed route services and other services in the area. So Longmont does really well. We're seeing really high ridership. We are also seeing increasing rates of denials because our schedule is so constantly full. People are very, very heavily utilizing the service. So that's something that we need to continue to be aware of. And as we get more operators, ideally we'd look to increase service if possible. Sure.
So what we try to do at the staff level, the city staff level, is when people ask for microtransit rides for certain times and more of the subscription service, we push them to the FlexRide service as being something that will cover that. So that's how we're working in tandem with the RTD services too. And remember that FlexRide and microtransit are both, microtransit is a partnership program, so we do receive RTD dollars, so you'll hear a little bit about that later.
That is the end of my update. So, unless you guys have any questions, is it you, Greg?
Yeah. I'm back. Now, future plan service adjustments. And this is included with the Colorado 119 BRT. We're going to be looking at, and we work with Phil a lot on this, when the BRT opens, hopefully, fall of 2027, we are going to reimagine the local routes here in town. Part of that is we have an expectation of the First and Main station. That's going to be the new hub. Currently, the hub is 8th and Kaufman or 8th and Bross. With the Kaufman busway and Kaufman improvements, there will no longer be a location where we can have 4 or 5 buses at one time. So we envision that First and Main location will be the new central hub for Longmont Local, Longmont Regional, where they all can meet and people can make a transfer. And part of that will be, it'll be phased and as it's warranted. I imagine, I foresee, originally everything will just sort of go in there. We'll make some minor adjustments, but we'll be looking at making a route that maybe goes east to the Walmart out on 119 that we currently don't have service there. We'll be, in-town routes looking to optimize them basically. Where are we having service? Where do we need to make changes? Also, part of the Highway 119 is the opening of a park and ride at Park Ridge in Maine behind the Walmart there. And that'll be a northern location where, say, some of our local routes there again can meet regional routes, the flex route out of Fort Collins, those types of things. So we're going to, basically have two hubs here in town. And it'll just be a question of how are we going to make all that work and fit. On the left here is the current routing, and on the right, that's how we somewhat envision it. Like any plan, once you start really putting pen to paper, you'll figure out, okay, this is what's going to work, this isn't what's going to work. System optimization plan. Did you want to take that, Chris?
So back in 2019, RTD began what we called, there was two components to it. It was what Reimagine RTD, and it had what we called our system optimization plan as well as a mobility plan for the future. We started this in 2019, so that was obviously pre-pandemic. The pandemic hit, so we kind of put it on pause, and then finally finished it in 2022. But the intent of what we were calling the System Optimization Plan, or AKA the SOP, was to provide a framework for what our future fixed route bus service should look like over in this case, the period from when it was completed in 2022 up through 2027. Now, our service development team 3 times a year will do updates to the system through the run board process. A lot of that is making sure that buses are running on time. Are there reroutes that need to be done? A lot of just sort of kind of I don't want to say maintenance of the system because it's more than that, but keeping the system going as it is, whereas the SOP was intended to be really a little bit more of a longer term framework of what do we want the system to actually look like. And so a lot of the routes were, I hate to use the word optimized since that's but were optimized to perform better than the previous structure that we had. We're at the point now where we're getting close to the horizon year, which was 2027. So this summer, we're going to be going to our board, giving them an update on how it's performed to date. And we're at roughly, and I hope I have my number right, roughly about 83, I think, % of where we wanted to be with the restoration of service that was defined in the system optimization plan. And we'll have a much more detailed analysis when we go to our board in July, and obviously that will become public information that can be shared with this group as well as anyone else. But the piece that we also wanted to let you know is, given that the 2027 horizon is getting close, we intend next year to start the process of getting a contractor on board to do our next round of the system optimization plan. We're changing the name of it simply because I guess SOP, and I didn't know this, is also an acronym for Standard Operating Procedures, so we didn't want to create any confusion, so we've gone with Comprehensive Operation Analysis, or ACOA. When we start that process, obviously there will be, just like before, there will be a lot of community engagement that will be associated with that effort. So we will be giving you updates on that as that goes along, and again, expect that you will be part of that process. And then I'm going to jump to, let's see, an update on the Colorado 119, or the diagonal BRT. Unfortunately, our project managers on the engineering side, neither of them, both of them had some family obligations that came up last minute. So you're getting the B team tonight. So if you do have questions, I hope I can answer those. But if not, Phil knows as much or more than I do on this one. So between the two of us, hopefully we can respond to any questions that you may have. And I didn't mean to insinuate that you were part of the B team, Phil. So. Okay, right. No. So, I think everybody in this body is probably generally aware of what BRT or bus rapid transit is. Generally, the intent of it is to have a higher quality bus service, provide faster ride than standard, a little bit of other upgrades to avoid delays. And US 36 is somewhat of a model for what we looked at when we were coming up with the planning for the 119 BRT, in that anything we can do to speed up the travel time of the bus to make it more attractive for our customers. And Greg, I think, had mentioned, I think one of his slides had reference to the PEL, or what we called the Planning and Environmental Linkage Study. That was completed in 2019, and that served as kind of the framework for what we're looking at for the improvements on 119. Some changes were made from the original recommendations from that study, but in general, what the study did was looked at the future demand in the corridor, which, no surprise, there's a lot of future demand on it, and then looking at ways that we could optimize the transit services along the corridor between the two cities, Boulder and Longmont, by reducing travel time and enhancing reliability. And one of the recommendations was, at the time, for a managed lane similar to what's on US 36, that has since been altered a little bit, and I think you're kind of aware of, I think we've presented to this body on this, but just to make sure that it's known. So the bus rapid transit, or the enhancements that we're going to be seeing on 119, include Q bypass lanes. That's essentially a bus lane at the signalized intersections, so that the bus is not caught in the delay or the backup at the signalized intersections, specifically, J Road, 52, and Niwot Road. And along with that, we will have improvements to the stations that are along, or what we will be calling stations on the corridor. And then on the roadway side, you'll also be seeing, and there's nobody from CDOT here tonight, so I don't want to talk too much about what they're doing, but some of the work that the state will be taking on includes improvements to the signage and striping and lighting along the corridor. And the big thing is going to be a reconfiguration of intersections, the big one being at 52 and also at Airport, to make those intersections a lot more efficient. And then
we should probably interject real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have it on here, but the Hover Street intersection will be major reconfigurations. So we're working on that plan now with CDOT to try to figure out what that's going to look like ultimately. It has been reconfigured. I think we came to you originally, it was going to be an underpass, Boulder bound. Now it's going to be a bridge structure over Hover, is what they say. Flyover over Hover. Sorry. So,
couldn't resist.
But we're trying to figure out now how the bicycle infrastructure works with that too. So there's going to have to be a lot of improvements to the bicycle piece that isn't part of that. But and Airport, the reconfiguration piece there is really about changing the median piece of that to not be two-way. It's going to be a one-way, only northbound. So if you're trying to get to the diagonal heading Longmont bound and you're south on Airport Road, you will not be able to take that maneuver anymore. It was a pretty low volume maneuver, but there's some issue of how that inconveniences a few folks, and so we're trying not to do that. But it's going to make the operations much better, and it avoids a signal for that Longmont bound direction of the diagonal, because with the original intent and that being two-way traffic as it is today, that would have required a new signal, which again increases our rear end crashes at those signals. So a lot of thought went into the idea of how we make that work. So thanks, Chris.
And before I hand off on the system optimization plan or the general overall 119, any questions? No.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
And Phil, you might be able to answer this as well. The BRT route is going to go north on Hover and then cut over to what would be the hub on First and Main?
Then we'll use Boston. So we go north on Hover from 119 up to Boston,
Then
east on Boston. We'll have the new at-grade crossing completed then at the railroad tracks. So Boston will go all the way from Airport Road basically on the west to Martin Street on the east. And so that connection will be where the buses go. And we've really planned for that to get the buses off of Ken Pratt and out of that traffic.
I see. And then those are stops along the way on. There will be some stops on Hover then for.
There'll be stops on Hover, but none on Boston.
Yeah.
The next stop after it gets north of Nelson, there's a stop planned, and then after that, there's no stops planned until you get over to First and Main.
Yep.
Now, there is some public outreach that's happening, and I don't know if that's going to be discussed, but there's going to be some public outreach soon on RTD's planned stops in Longmont. So we are going to really need this group to come out and evaluate those stops and make sure that's what we need as a city. And that's our chance to really have that input into the RTD process.
and you can kind of see the stops on this graphic. We also have a listing of the stops on a future slide.
So I have a question on, do you foresee the orange pattern taking over the J?
I'm going to defer to my service planning colleague on that. So
I think the next couple slides are mine
Yeah,
anyway.
it's
So
okay.
I've been working on this for 3 years. So, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the next slide. I think that this is our timeline for the. I think a lot of your questions will be answered here in the next couple minutes. So, this is our timeline. Originally, we anticipated opening in Q2 of 2027. The big issue we have right now is if the station at First and Main is going to be ready, because there'll be no place down that way to have buses lay over. Buses take recovery. And so, that's kind of up in the air, and we're working with Phil, his people on, when that's going to be done and when we can go ahead with our plans. This is the stops that are located in Longmont, orange pattern and blue pattern. We have added a couple of stops working with Phil that we thought would be valuable, 17th and Francis, and Hover and Village at the Peaks Mall. Add those 2 stops in for future. And then this is what's that word?
Yeah, this is basically our walk distance from the stop. So we like to do about half-mile spacing, assuming people will walk just under a half-mile typically to get to this kind of stop anyway, a bus rapid transit stop. So you can kind of see where the coverage overlaps, and then you can see the gaps in coverage, and that's where we're asking people from the city to come out and say, this is okay, or maybe we need additional stops.
And we will locate them closer than a half a mile if the need is there. It's not like, oh, well, no, it's a half a mile, we have to go. If we find there's value or an area that's not being covered, then yeah, we can, and the need is there, we'll put a stop there. But it is supposed to be rapid transit, so we want to be able to get through as efficiently as we can.
I would agree is looking at Boston, but my general question is in the future, because, Longmont's growing, how quickly can RTD actually produce another stop? Because I know Boston Avenue is ripe for a lot more development once it's out of the floodplain. So I'm just wondering.
Relatively easily, and that's part of the process when we're working with Phil. If Phil knows, let's say a development's coming in, say it's multifamily housing or transportation oriented development, that type of thing's going in, we usually will work with the developer and say, hey, we need you and your building process to put a stop in.
Okay.
So it's literally as things are being built, we like to be a part of the process and say, is this a place where we can have a bus stop? Here's the requirements that we need to make it, I'm losing it. It's been a long day. ADA compliant, those types of things. Do we want shelters there? Those types of things. So we work with developers as those things are coming in. To add
and
stuff.
is that from the standpoint of a developer, is that something that they know, like if they want something like a bus stop because they know that maybe their residents could have less parking, etc., and less car travel, is that something they started the process at the beginning, or?
We talk to them as they come in. We have pre-application meetings, and we'll talk to them about the possibility of accessing a great transit route that's right there. We've talked to some of the recent annexations that you've probably heard about in the news about their proximity, especially to the Orange Line over there on the west side of town. So we make them aware of that and make sure that they have great walk access to the stations we're planning, or, as Greg mentioned, have them construct their portion or their half of the bus station, if not all of it, as part of their project, because it is a benefit for their project at the end of the day.
Thank you.
This is great. Looking at the Boston Bus Rapid Transit, there's a pretty large anchor business that would be suited by having a bus stop there. I don't know if you all have reached out to Left Hand to see if that would be a potential for a stop, but that would be an interest to get people from Boulder to come to local breweries.
This is a great point, and I think there's some redevelopment that's happening in that area too. So we'll definitely work on that as we bring this out to the public. We, as Longmont staff, in cooperation with the RTD staff, to put these meetings together and start to talk about those possibilities. I think that's maybe where Board Member Wickland was going as well. So, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. I mean where his conversation was going. Sorry.
Basically, we're open to stops and adding stops, and usually, and this is just full disclosure, for us, it's the cost of construction usually that will hamper. We have to have those things a couple years out to fit into our budget, and so that's why we really rely on developers when they're building something to go in and include that in part of their project. So
I will say that we've had issues from the city's side of things, just trying to, and our RTD as well, that balance between, is this going to be rapid transit or is it going to have many stops like a local bus? And we're really trying to get away from the idea that this is a local bus. So that's why you don't see a lot of stops, maybe initially where we've actually added a lot of stops to this map, as you can probably tell. There was very few stops to start. But anyway, so we're just, it's one of those days. But anyway, we are trying to get to the point where we're having that balance, and so we're gonna have to work with RTD, because RTD is gonna be the ultimate decider. Their board will be the ultimate decision maker on this, on where the stops go to get the best bang for our buck, I suppose, for the bus rapid transit.
So with moving the Bolt basically to BRT and taking off Ken Pratt, then there's going to be a bigger time, or you're not going to be serving the south part of Longmont as well, because it's just going to be that much further north.
And that's part of the reimagine when we go in, because obviously those couple of stops that are on Ken Pratt will go away for the BRT. Okay. We still intend to have local service there. Those local services will connect to the BRT at First and Main or on Hover or wherever, where somebody can transfer. And so that's part of the process of, okay, once this gets open, or as we get close to opening, okay, how can we fill these gaps in where we know we're going to need bus service on Ken Pratt? What's that going to look like? Where's it going to start? Where's it going to end? So those are all things that we'll go through the process as we get closer. Probably start that next year in 26 with, okay, we have an opening date. What are we going to do on the local stuff to make it all work very well together? So,
Okay, that's good to know. So does that mean you're going to increase the number of trips for the local buses to correspond with the BRT?
There again, the local buses, the number of trips, the number of is all based on demand, and we are supposed to get this summer the new service standards from our board, as far as if it's hitting a certain number of passengers per hour, you know, it should have this sort of service level, and that's part of our process now. As far as, you know, we are constantly evaluating ridership numbers and passengers per hour, and where can we increase, and honestly, where are places that we are over serving because we don't have the ridership, and that's system wide. That's not just Longmont, and so I hate to make any promises that, like I said, you know, that's all going to be part of the reimagine, I guess, reimagine Longmont with the opening of the 119.
Okay. Because I mean, there's always like the chicken and the egg type of situation. The more routes, more times you do, then the more it's going to be utilized. And currently, I would argue that it's not utilized heavily just because there just isn't often enough. And especially, like, from my point of view, I don't choose to use it because it's only every hour most of the time. And it just doesn't make it very optimal for the average everyday person trying to just do errands and stuff around town. But I'm sure you know that already.
Duly noted.
And kind of following on from my fellow board member about the J.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see that in the Longmont side that it's going to be kind of covered by that orange route, but we're on the Boulder side because it used to go to CU Boulder, but I'm not sure that it is now.
Next slide.
Okay.
All right. I think it's the next slide. So here is the. Oh, go ahead.
One more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go back to the previous slide, please.
Yeah, sure.
Does RTD envision that local transit riders in Longmont will not be able to use the BRT and pay a local fare to do that? For example, I'm thinking of the riders near Airport and Nelson who are going to lose their 324 service.
So if they ride from Longmont to Boulder, catch the airport bus.
Well, what if someone just wanted to ride from Airport and Nelson, say up to the Walmart? Could they take the orange line?
Right now, now correct me if I'm wrong, right now all the fares are local. There's no regional fare.
Are you saying that the BRT is going to be free?
Would it be free? I'm sorry. I'm confusing what you guys. You buy up the fares, and so.
Or would there be a local fare to ride
Yes,
the BRT locally?
The BRT, yes, there would be.
There would. Okay, thanks.
$325 or $275. $275. I haven't driven a bus in a couple years. I can't. Okay, so this is our trunk line stops for the BRT. I think we've covered them in the previous slides. This is just to give a comparison of what Boulder is getting on their stops so that you guys were aware of what Boulder's getting. And as you can see, the orange pattern stays on 28th, goes down to Broadway, and will serve the East Campus and the main campus. As far as you can get on Stampede, it will not go, where it used to go into that little area there, because of all the construction that the CU is doing in that area. We're losing a place to have the bus recover, layover, maneuver around. So this was actually requested by CU and by City of Boulder to come down 28th, and it'll be Baseline and Broadway is where that bus will start and end between Longmont and Boulder. There again, we're going to have public meetings, and I think that question came up. So as of now, they are scheduled for May 5th and May 6th, where we're going to have public meetings and get public input on all of this. So the process that we've gone through here for the last year, year and a half has been stakeholder involved, Phil, City of Boulder, sitting down, hammering out these patterns, hammering out, where their stops are going to be, making sure that we had as much input from Community Solutions, all the transit-oriented organizations up in this area. This right here is just a list of all the stops in each direction. Yeah, okay. And this is the envisioned frequency and span that we're going to have. I'm not sure if you have a printed copy of that. It is going to be an increase over the service that is currently provided, especially in the peaks. Adding back that orange pattern, which was the replacement for basically the J.
So it looks like you're not going to be returning to, if I remember correctly, Bolt was like every 10 or 15 minutes before the pandemic. Was that right?
I can't remember exactly. I know in the peaks it was pretty good. And I think between the two of them, we're going to be pretty close to, in the peaks, 15-minute frequency. Opening day, midday will be, 30-minute frequency. The ridership between the two, to start out with. Now, everything is dependent on usage. If we find that the usage is there, we will increase the service.
Okay.
I should say resource dependent.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's again, an easy joke is that chicken and egg story once again, and that's where I look at it is, I was like, all right, I'm going to a concert in Boulder, all right, and I know a lot of friends that go to concerts in Boulders, and then also, what are they doing? They're not taking a bus because, well, right now I see the, weekdays, it's going to end at 9 p.m. Saturdays 6 p.m. Is that what, if I'm reading that correctly?
I think I don't have it. Do you have it, Phil?
I think it just says increased frequency between 6 and 9.
Yeah, that's just increase the
okay.
frequency. We're still going to keep
So
that
what will be the
service
late-
span.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then what is the time now? How late?
I think the last one out of Boulder is midnight, roughly,
Okay.
at top of my head, 11:30. And that's just the top of my head. I don't have the schedule in front of you,
All
but
right.
we do run that later service between.
Well, I think maintaining that as much as possible, because then you also encourage development, which then encourages tax revenue to then help RTD as well. So it's like, yeah, you might not have the funding, but you got to increase service to then get the tax revenue actually coming in. So, chicken or egg, takes both. So.
So, I know you keep saying, and I've heard this ever since I first got on the transportation as a council liaison. The chicken egg thing. Supposedly there will be enough communication in the community to where they can understand all of this and understand that the ridership is very, very important. in order for the time, so that we can have increased times, shorter times, wait times to be able to get on the buses. But how long will you allow the time, whether it be 6 months, a year, before you determine if you can increase it? Or because it takes time for that communication to get out to everyone, for them to realize that, oh wow, this will be better, because if not, they're going to take the micro transit within town to get to this or that. There's a lot of information. We have a lot going on. And so it's important for you all to give us enough time for that ridership to increase before you say we're not going to provide more opportunities for. So I want to know, is it 2 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year?
Oh, that we give a route an opportunity to we give them, and you can't put a number on it, and part of it is like, and the best example I can give right now is the CO7 starter service that they're going to try to run between Brighton and Boulder. They have 2 years as a pilot program to prove it. RTD, as far as I know, and we don't really have a prove it. Now we do on like the microtransit where we give out, a couple of years, and you have a specific period of time to make your numbers, to do your thing. On our fixed route transit, it's not really a prove it or lose it. We do evaluate, and I can give a couple examples. The AB in Boulder that goes between Boulder and the airport, post-pandemic has just exploded with riders. In particular, like a Sunday evening coming back from the airport to Boulder, a lot of standing room only, a lot of people getting left behind because there's not even standing room only on the bus. It takes time to address that. So like currently right now, we are actually working on changes for September. Part of that is in Longmont. Our buses aren't running on time. It's Bross Street. We've got to make some adjustments. We're looking at extending the service hours. So we're actually doing that now. So we're, 6 months ahead on changes for September. And so it takes time to get to get the numbers, put a plan together, present it to the board, get it approved by the board, and then implement it. And so, unfortunately, we do service changes 3 times a year. Going into that service change, we address ridership. Number one is something, passengers per hour is our standard. How many people are boarding this bus every hour? As far as, in the service span, if we see people that are riding early, people riding late, do we need to, is a bus full at 6 o'clock in the morning? Do we need to add a 5:30 bus? Those types of things. So those are always addressed ongoing. Now, going the reverse way, taking a route away because, we don't think it, in my department, we don't think it's justified or used or whatever, is very, very, very difficult to do. I mean, I don't even consider, and this is just myself talking, as far as what I've seen. Politically, it's very difficult to say, well, this route's underperforming, we're taking it away, or this route, or we're going to cut service hours, because we have a board that we answer to, and they make those decisions on what gets increased, what gets decreased. We can propose something. We can say, this is what we see, this is what we think, but ultimately it's up to the board of directors. They make those decisions. So there again, we take public input very seriously when we hear things, when somebody takes the time to write an email, show up to one of our public outreach meetings, or come here. We take that very seriously, and we take that back, and we look at that and say, do they have a valid point? In this situation, we know he's got a valid point because we've already proposed, so.
I guess I just want to make sure, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I just want to make sure that this is successful from the very beginning. We want people to ride it, and we know it can be very beneficial and efficient if it's set up the way it needs to be set up, and no one knows what that is yet.
Oh, the BRT?
Yes, the BRT. That's what I'm saying. Because this will be, it will be amazing, I believe. And so I just want it to be as successful from the very beginning as possible. And if people have to wait that an hour, I think a lot of people may not take it. And so from the beginning. So I guess I was just trying to figure out, like you said, the AB1 has been going for forever, and you all taking 6 months knowing that you have standing room only. I know I take that bus every time to the airport, and the last bus on the weekend is at 11:20, and I'm like booking to not miss that bus, because what happens is I have to take an Uber, and that's like way more expensive. So when you already know 6 months in advance that you said it'd be easily to add more time, but obviously not. I know you have to take it to the board. Like, we have a board here who are accountable, but that's obvious that you need to change the time or have another bus to come when you have standing room only and people are missing the bus constantly.
And if you look at the schedule, we now go a lot later on the AB.
Oh, really? Since when? Because I just took the bus
like
from
January
Japan
or
like
September.
2 weeks ago, and I had to get an Uber.
I can't remember if it was September or January that we pushed that out to where I think it's like 12:30, 1 o'clock, that last, and it was particularly on Sunday where there was the issue, and coming out of the pandemic, we really had resource issues with getting enough drivers.
I get that.
And Deborah Johnson's got one thing that she has really stuck by is she is not going to add service we can't serve.
That makes sense.
And so if we're dropping routes still, what's the point of adding more service if we don't have the people to service it? And it's one thing if you have to drop a route every now and again. There are unforeseen circumstances, a blizzard or whatever, people can't get to work. But if it's happening on a consistent basis and we can't provide that service, you're standing out there for a bus, and like you said, you miss that one. Well, if you miss the one because the driver called in sick and now you got to wait another half hour, that is part of the frustration that you talk about. So yeah, our last bus right now leaving gate 8 DIA is 1:20 in the morning. So that was the other thing that we saw. A lot of people were coming in late on Sunday night too. It wasn't just like, we need 3 buses at 9 o'clock. We noticed that people were arriving later, that those late buses were full. So we do work to really, address those kind of.
But it takes about 6 months. That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's talking about Saturdays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's at 11:20.
Saturday's 11:20.
11:20.
Yeah.
That's the bus that I couldn't make, and there's no 1:20 in the morning for that one. So I don't know why on Sunday and not on Saturdays, but I'm just saying.
And because CU students coming back on Sunday, people coming back from their vacation or whatever. So even if they leave on a Wednesday to go on vacation, they're coming back on Sunday if they're going on a long weekend. And so that was what we noticed was we weren't really overloaded a lot outbound, bar spring break or Thanksgiving or Christmas, but it was very consistent on Sunday, the overloads coming back from DIA.
So, looking at your table right there, if I'm understanding this correctly, if you want to go anywhere on the orange route and you want to get to CU at any time not peak, then you're kind of out of luck.
Yep.
Is that right?
For starters. And there again, this is the starter service. This is what we envision is starting out. Now, if we see that the orange pattern, is overperforming, we can add trips to that. We're basing some of this off of like bell time schedules for CU, for employees to get and students to get from Longmont to CU and back to Longmont. We'll still have that all day. We've actually added stops in so that people can transfer to the hop. At Folsom, we actually added a stop at Folsom and Canyon to make that transfer happen during the middle of the day. And we can keep that frequency where the ridership has proven to downtown Boulder. Downtown Boulder Station is the prime destination of people coming from Longmont.
And this will be part of your public meetings, right?
Yes, this will be part of the public meetings too. The frequency, and if there again, we come back from the public meetings and there's a desire for more orange patterns, we can definitely look at shifting. It wouldn't maybe be an increase overall in, we can add more buses now to the orange pattern. It would be literally taking from the blue to the orange, would be, especially in those midday trips. But we have tried to build it so that people can have that transfer to CU.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like people who maybe have a class at midday, or they aren't teaching until midday, or they have classes that are not the normal hours, then, and they live on the east side of Longmont, they're kind of out of luck on using the bus to get there, really. I kind of, maybe something to think about would be to have kind of a combination type of thing, like maybe one or two goes along the orange route during the day, and then you're kind of covering that. Or it stops early and then you can transfer or something. I don't know. But just something so you can cover those people on that east side, which are going to be totally missed out most of the day. Okay, thanks. Oh, actually, since you talked about the airport, I bring it up every time RTD comes. When is Longmont going to have a bus to the airport?
The bus to the airport is very difficult because you just can't say, I'm going to have 3 or 4 trips in the morning. I'm going to have 3 or 4 trips at night, because that's not how people fly in and fly out. So to get a bus from Longmont directly to the airport is going to be an extremely expensive, because you would be looking like, okay, we need a bus every hour going there and a bus every hour coming back in order to make it to where, we've talked about coming back from Boulder after concerts, and if there's not a bus there, and I know from my standpoint, when I ride the train or I ride the bus to the airport myself, if there's not going to be a bus around when I fly back in, I'm going to have to drive out to the airport and park or whatever the situation is. And so that is the biggest hurdle, is starting a service that's that expensive. Phil talks to us about it all the time.
I mean, even if there was a bus that connected Longmont to the AB1, there's no way for us, apart from going all the way to Boulder and then all the way back again, and it takes forever to go that way.
I have
go straight down
ideas.
287.
I have ideas, but it may be down the road. I mean, I envision a bus that goes first in Maine, goes directly to Table Mesa, and then heads out.
Or to the airport.
Yeah, or to the airport.
But there again, see, so even like on the AB, the
Yes.
majority of ridership on that comes from Table Mesa, McCaslin, in Flatirons Park and Ride.
I mean, I do the same thing, that I go down to McCaslin and get the bus down there.
Yeah.
It would be really nice to go by public transit the whole way rather than having to drive halfway and then get the bus.
Yeah.
I bet that's a lot of your McCaslin ridership is people like us who are coming from the north and going down to catch it because they don't want to go all the way to Boulder just to come back out again. So even if there was a connection south, that would make a massive improvement for people in Longmont trying to get to the airport. So I would say put that high priority.
Yeah, sorry, this is beating a dead horse. I go to the airport all the time. My wife goes to the airport all the time. No, I'm serious though. It's 2 hours and 21 minutes if I were to go to the airport to arrive by 10:30. That's 2 connections. If one of the buses is late, that's not reliable. The other way is you can take microtransit to the bus stand to Union Station to the airport. That's not an option. Are there any routes right now that RTD is servicing that is on the I-25 corridor that end up going to the airport?
No.
So there's nothing. So
Part of that is a lot of the I-25 corridor is out of the RTD district. So we are not allowed by law to pick up or drop passengers off outside of our district. So like the new park and ride that was built out on, is it 119? We're not allowed to use that. Now, there's a couple that we're looking at. They're building a new one at Colorado 7 and I-25. The park and ride itself is right in the district. It's right on the border. And so we're looking at using that as a park and ride. It maybe there's a situation where the 104L, which goes to the airport, could eventually come up there and start, and then do its normal route out to the airport. But that's all long range.
does RTD have any data from, picking up at the airport to the final destination? Like, do you all know that some people are going to Longmont, continuing their routes?
Not necessarily their final destination. Now, basically the data that we have is how many people we picked up at the airport on a trip and where they got off the bus. So,
is there a way that we can collect data that shows how many people are getting picked up at DIA and end up in Longmont or vice versa?
There might be data collection that Chris would probably know better because he's more in planning than I schedule the buses and the trains.
Sure.
So yeah, one of our FTA requirements is that we do an onboard survey, and I'm trying to remember what the cadence of that is. I think, just completed one, and as part of the onboard survey, they do ask questions on, what is your origin and ultimate destination. So some of that data we do have. I don't know how clear, how precisely it's broken down, but we may have some information that we could follow up on to see if we can respond to that question.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So when you're changing the routes for the First and Kaufman, how are you making those route recommendations? Are you looking at data? How is that done?
There again, we have data of where people are getting on and where people are getting off. Okay.
But for future stops, how do you know where to put those stops?
Well, a lot of it will incorporate what we currently have. So it could be a route that now ends at 8th and Kaufman or 8th and Bross currently, just goes down Kaufman to and none of the other part of the route changes. Now on going, let's say a new route that goes out to the Walmart on 119, that'll be based on, we'll look at it and go, all right, here's some high density development. Here's an employer. Walmart obviously is a destination. You want to have a stop, pair of stops there. So a lot of that is, working with Longmont, working with Phil, going, okay, where do we want to put these stops in? And so in reimagining it, a lot of it'll be using current infrastructure, using current routing. It might just change a little bit. So I know up on the north end, you know, there'll be slight modifications where we might have to put a stop or two in. But a lot of it's just using, because we can't afford to put all new stops in. And, you know, the stops are successful to an extent. They're being used. So that's part of the process. That's sitting down with the stakeholders and going, okay, where do we want a route to go? Where do we want the stops to be? Similar to what we just did with the 119. What stops are important to that one, you know, that corridor, high usage that are going to be desirable without having to stop at every single.
So the heat maps, the density heat maps is something that you also use?
You know, probably. I mean, there again, this will be the first time I've reimagined an entire city.
I will just add that we worked with RTD, I think before, Greg, you were working with the planning group, but we worked with them and the consulting firm to help to decide which routes made sense. So they used a lot of that data that they had from surveys and from the different heat maps that were available to them, where they have the actual, you know, how many people get on at each stop, how many people you get off at each stop. They have all that data based on the drivers, you know, when they, or well, actually it's based on the survey data when there's somebody actually with a clipboard counting people as they get on and off. So they have people who actually do those ride checks every few years. So they had that information, and the consulting team put that together for them and us so that we could figure out now where the stops go. I think that's exactly what Greg was saying, is those are dictated based on kind of distances and walk distances from certain things and proximity to trip generators and those things. But we'll work with them to make sure the stops, and if they're not in the right place, we add stops typically to these newer routes pretty easily. It's a pretty seamless system with RTD, as long as there's ADA accessibility and those kind of things taken care of. So
great. And for that meeting on the 5th and the 6th, is that open to the public?
Yes.
Where is it and what times?
The 5th and the 6th.
That's right.
Those are virtual meetings. There's going to be the 5th and the 6th in the evening, and I believe and Phil will be getting filled in on all the information. I think the 6th is a midday virtual meeting.
Great. And I look forward to that data about the Denver to Longmont ridership. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again, and also thank you, Councilmember Yarborough, for putting us down this hole. No. I appreciate it, because that was actually one of my first questions 3 years ago when I first met you guys. Was kind of, you know, how long does it take to create a route in a way, and I would just like to point out that for my time on this board for 3 years, we've been talking about a route that goes east on 119 to get you to the hospital, the Walmart, and where the high density areas are. And now we're talking about another 3 years until maybe it will be ready. 2 years. Okay, I saw it. So, you know, I just like to point that out. Like it seems like it takes forever. I understand there's funding problems, et cetera, and then also, you know, it's great to hear that there's an airport bus that picks up the last one at 1:20 during the week. But again, that doesn't help Longmont at all. So, like, you know, it still can't get home. And that's where, you know, the BRT would be great. Like, I wouldn't mind going all the way to Boulder if I have to, then come back home. But if I can't get home from Boulder at late at night, like even last night, I flew in at 11:30. Luckily, my brother parked at the airport because there was no real option for me to get home, and he had to go to Fort Collins, so he had an extra trip for me. And then also, you know, I hope that the board understands. I mentioned this last year as well in front of board members, that, you know, it's, you know, I read studies of Austin and Charlotte and compared, you know, an organization compared the two. the last train in Austin leaves downtown Austin at 7 p.m. So who's going to invest in any of those TODs? What developer is going to invest in that infrastructure? And then the value also of that changes. So like where Charlotte actually goes until 2 a.m. even after COVID. Before COVID, it was 1 a.m. Now they're up to 2 a.m. for their last train. And their TODs are worth a whole lot more money, which brings in more revenue for then RTD. So it's chicken and egg, you got to have both. RTD has to be willing to put in the investment to then get the developers to build the housing and the businesses and the density and the et cetera that we need. So I just hope that that's really hitting the board home because they ultimately make the decisions. So, but that's all I have for now.
I just wanted to say one thing about that. We were supposed to have 2 board members here. One is sick.
Yeah.
Didn't want to. I asked her not to come. Quite frankly, she was going to come masked up, and the other one was working on some family issues as well with taking care of some grandchildren, I guess, while her son was out. So I just want to let you know that they did know that this meeting was happening. They both send their apologies for missing it. So if there's anything you need to get to the board, or if we want to have a direct conversation, we can certainly get that information to the board members. Lynn Geisinger and Karen Banker are our board members for Longmont, and we can get that to them directly if you need. So let me know.
I will.
I bring this up every time RTD come as well. But, I mean, Longmont and Boulder are almost the same population. I mean, we're really similar, right around the 100,000 mark. Boulder's bus routes, big extension, many, many, many routes. I don't know how many routes Boulder has, whereas Longmont has 4. It's a big disparity between the two cities. And yes, Longmont is more kind of spread out, and we don't have university here. But I mean, all Longmont residents are paying similar taxes as people in Boulder for transportation, but they're getting hardly any service in comparison to the people in Boulder. They're paying for Boulder's transportation, if you kind of think about it that way, and we don't get the same service here. And I'm just wondering, like, at what point is Longmont going to be more of a higher priority for RTD to provide the type of services that other cities in your network get?
That is a great question for a board member. That is, to put it, above my pay grade. So,
can we take it to the board?
We have actually taken that to the board, and our answer back from the board has typically been, once you get a major university that has over 20,000 students, full-time students that live on campus and are in the ages from 18 to 22, will probably be considered more along the same line. So that's just the pat answer I've been given for 25 years of working for the city. So,
and I'll just say from my observations, is the ridership on their main routes that we service is really high. So if you look at the skip, we need Arctics to handle the number of people.
You might want to define that one.
And Arctic is, the articulated buses like they use but we have no place. RTD doesn't have a garage facility to service them in Boulder. So, there again, the FF, that commuter between Denver and Boulder is really highly used. The Bolt here does really well on that, and that's why it was considered for the BRT, was because the ridership on the Bolt, and we think we can get that increased with the increased frequency, and obviously not having to sit in front of IBM for 3 light cycles, will help ridership and drive ridership and bringing the J back to give that connection between Boulder and Longmont. And so that's just my personal observation, is that they're because of CU, they have I think the age group, I don't know how many kids have cars or don't have cars, the transit is used quite a bit. So
that is true. But I mean, that they get more use because there is more buses. So, like, yes, there are buses here, but they're not heavily used because they are so infrequent and are always late. So they're not reliable. People can't use them to go to work, or I think Longmont is. It feels like, from my point of view, that we're always kind of a afterthought in kind of RTD's point of view, that like we still don't have a rapid transport between Denver and Longmont still. Like that has never been brought back since COVID, and I have noticed that like there used to be loads of people taking their bikes and parking and going down that route. But now, no one does it because there isn't a route anymore. There's no fast way for us to get down to Denver anymore. And it feels like, yes, we don't have university, but there's still 100,000 people here who could potentially use it and are forced to be car-centric because RTD doesn't prioritize the same way it does other cities. So I really think it's about time that instead of just saying, yes, we don't have a university and we don't have that younger generation, we still have 100,000 people here that are not being serviced adequately by RTD.
Can you go back to that slide that had the years and the ridership? I can't remember what slide number that was.
That was way up front. It'll take
Yeah.
me a little bit to, but yeah, I'd be glad to go back to that.
Yeah. Ooh.
Oh, that was
No.
paratransit.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the regional routes, the boardings.
Yeah, go. I think it's one more back. It had like a table. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah. So what changed from 2023 to 2024? Did the frequency change? Did something change, or was it apples to apples? Same routes.
This is apple
same,
to apples average daily boardings per day.
And there was no route changes, no schedule changes, nothing.
The only thing that changed is we moved from Kaufman during the construction over to Ross. So we built some temporary gates. Longmont built some temporary gates over there for us to use.
Yeah, we did swap the service from one side of the Roosevelt Park to the other side.
Okay.
And it was confusing for folks. We tried our best to put as much wayfinding as we could to get people across the park, but I think people were, there was some issue with the parking lot not seeming as accessible. So I'm sure there was a learning curve that's happened that's reflected in these numbers.
Okay. So it's not truly an apples to apples comparison. So when we're looking at this, we should take it with a grain of salt because it's not a true apples to apples comparison.
Yeah. And that's why, when I said it bears monitoring why they dropped a little bit this last year.
Okay. So when you all are looking at the routes and the schedule, please take that into account.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Believe me, nobody's going, we need to cut these routes because they dropped a little bit.
Because I'm with them. We need more frequent routes. If we want ridership up, it needs to be frequent. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's all right. That's all right. I can tap dance. I know. Actually, let me go back, make sure. So we got there. So this is just what we're doing here for the conclusion of the 119 update. Monthly meetings with local community, CDOT, updates. Ongoing public outreach, like I said, additional public outreach meetings and a survey. We're also going to be doing a survey. So I'm sure Phil will get that link, and if he wants to pass it along, it'll be in our public outreach meetings also in May, to where you can go in and basically this is where I live in, this is where I want to go. And so that we can get some real, and the original routes were built off a survey we did 3 years ago. So as far as, and that's how we know that the downtown Boulder Station is still the number one location people are trying to get to from Longmont. CU is a close second as far as the number of people leaving Longmont and trying to get to Boulder. So next up, everybody's favorite subject.
Good evening. I'm Patrick. Congratulations, you made it to the last tag team member of the RTD group here. So, my name is Patrick Stanley. I'm the manager of civil engineering at RTD, and I served as the project manager for the Northwest Rail Peak Service Study. So tonight we'll do a quick overview of what we discovered on the Peak Service Study, and we'll kind of be able to give you at least a little bit of idea of what currently is going on right now with some of the state conversations and joint service. First, so I wanted to start real quick with a very quick overview for some of you that maybe not be familiar. You're probably all familiar at this point, but 2004, the Northwest Rail was part of the Fast Tracks vote. And in 2010 we did the EE, which included 11 new stations and double tracking of the entire corridor, 55 trips per day. And at that time it was not financially possible for us to actually deliver that at that particular date. So 2013 we did the Northwest Area Mobility Study, or NAMS, and that did look at Northwest Rail, but it really looked at it from kind of phasing segments. So kind of Denver to, and I don't remember where the cutoffs were, but kind of increasing the full service as you went closer towards the north. But the same issue there. The groups, the team that worked on it, our advisory groups, as well as and the stakeholders, as well as RTD, determined at that time that the Northwest Rail was still desirable, but it was a little bit more of a long-term goal at that stage. 2016, the B line opened. The B line is the first segment, the first 6 miles that runs of the Northwest Rail that runs between Denver Union Station and the existing Westminster Station at kind of near 72nd and Lowell. And then 2017, we started working with our stakeholders to look at a peak service concept. And then in 2024 is kind of when we wrapped it up. We did a presentation to the RTD board in September of 2024. So a little bit about the peak service in general. It was designed to be a little bit kind of a starter service, get our foot in the door, get moving on the Northwest Rail, realizing that we were still financially constrained, couldn't quite get the full service completed. The route will follow the same route as we had planned. It actually follows the BNSF rails between really the Westminster Station as it exists today and Longmont. Again, it's an initial peak service concept. It's 3 trips from Longmont in the morning down to DUS, and then 3 trips in the evening from DUS to Longmont. We included 6 new stations along the way, one additional one in Westminster, 2 in Broomfield, 1 in Boulder, 1 in Longmont, and 1 in Louisville. Don't want to forget Louisville. And then with also a potential rail maintenance facility here in Longmont. So while we were going through the study, and one of the key things we really wanted to understand is what is it going to take to work with the BNSF on their railroad? Obviously, they own the corridor, and there are some complications with doing that. So that's one of the key parts we want to understand. What are the things? What are the agreements we need to have in place? What are the potential costs associated with working with the BNSF? We also early on did a study with a consultant to kind of understand, what is our realistic travel time from Denver Union Station to Longmont, and that determined that we could pretty reliably do a 65-minute plus or minus 2-minute time from DUS from Longmont and vice versa. And that's actually what we provided to the BNSF in our agreement with the BNSF. We actually let me back up a little bit. We did have an agreement with the BNSF to provide us with 30% plans, 30% cost estimates for track infrastructure improvements that they needed to have happen in order for us to operate on the freight lines and still allow them to operate as they need to as a company. So that's a parameter we gave to the BNSF. And that really drove what type of track improvements we actually needed to build onto the system. So as I touched on there, the track infrastructure improvements, the cost that we got from BNSF is based on 30% plans and the RTD travel time, what was needed for that. The key components really for the BNSF from a cost perspective are the infrastructure improvements, which is a one-time cost. Right at the beginning, it's all the track work that we'd have to build walls, maintenance roads, all that fun stuff, crossing improvements. And then the access easement is one of the other key pieces. That's a real property agreement that we have to have with the BNSF, where essentially we get an easement right to actually operate on the tracks. Again, that's a one-time payment that we would have to make to the BNSF. And then ongoing payments are things for like maintenance away, or the maintenance of the actual track itself, dispatching, those sort of type things. So there is a long-term operational cost that we have with the BNSF as well. So here's the part that you've probably all been kind of waiting for. This is what we discovered. So again, we talked about the infrastructure needed. We got stations, track infrastructure. We do have a midday storage site because obviously if we bring the trains in the morning, you've got a long period before we bring them back into eating, so we have to store those trains somewhere. We did look at that being in the Westminster location, kind of near the existing Westminster station. And then, of course, the rail maintenance facility up here in Longmont. The estimated ridership that we projected, RTD projected, is 1,100 daily boardings in 2030. And this is, I would like to point this out, this is based on the 2019 DRCOG regional travel demand model, which is the latest kind of consensus model that's been put together from DRCOG. As an agency, we kind of have to follow, we have to follow what the DRCOG model is saying. So obviously you're probably thinking in your head right now, 2019 was pre-pandemic. What does that mean for now? And that's a very good question. I want to point out the fleet itself. Just a little bit of information. We did land on a locomotive hauled coach. So that would basically be a locomotive with a cab car not a cab car, but a couple coaches were passenger only, and then a cab car. And a cab car generally has passengers in there, but also has controls on the side of the train, so you can actually reverse the train and go the other direction. We decided that we really needed 5 total train sets in all. Real quick breakdown here. We've got basically the rail vehicles themselves, about 140 million plus or minus. The bulk of the I'm trying to read here. Sorry. Put my glasses on because I'm blind. Sorry about that. I'm trying to remember the breakdown completely here so I don't lie to you. The 320 is really kind of your physical improvements, your grade crossings, the BNSF costs, etc. 90 million plus or minus for the rail maintenance facility, and then kind of your incidentals and your project design, roughly 15%, kind of making up the remainder there. So a total estimate for the capital cost was $650 million for the peak service, and an estimated annual operating cost of $12 to $16 million per year, and that's in 2024 dollars for all those numbers. So the interesting part, I think, that's kind of exciting what's going on right now, and it became pretty evident, I think, early on in the peak service study when we're working with CDOT and the Front Range Passenger Rail, is that there's another entity wanting to run on the same corridor. And we see, I'm sorry, I switched slides for you. So we see there's a lot of potential benefits, to having that potential service running in the same direction, in the same location. There could be efficiencies in operations, efficiencies in fleet, efficiencies in maintenance facilities, crews, all sorts of things that are potentially there. I would like to point out a little bit that Front Range Passenger Rail and the peak service commuter rail, so one's intercity, one's commuter rail, they serve different things typically when you look at them. Commuter rail is really designed to connect people from kind of outside outside areas into a metropolitan core, typically. They tend to run a little bit more frequently. They tend to be closer spaced. Whereas intercity rail is really designed to connect between cities within a state. And as a result, they tend to be a little bit, because of the longer distances and be competitive, they tend to be a little bit longer station spacing in between. I think they do typically can achieve higher speeds on intercity rail, but they also run a little less frequent sometimes as well. So would like to note that CDOT right now is working on their service development plan, which I believe is supposed to be completed in kind of at the end of the year this year, is my understanding, unless you've heard different, Bill. And that is really kind of defining what the inner city rail wants to be for their full build out. What I would say is that, obviously we were working on those two studies concurrently. Neither one of them was really designed specifically to look at a joint operation between the two. We were looking at a little bit more from an RTD perspective, commuter rail. They're looking at it a little bit more from an inner city rail. We're talking to each other and we're coordinating, but the purpose of those studies were distinct from each other. But now, as some of you are probably familiar with, there's Senate Bill 24-184, which passed last year, is really set up to kind of support a potential joint service, and between a lot of different state agencies. There's the CTIO, which is the Colorado Transportation Investment Office, CDOT, Front Range Passenger Rail, RTD. Oh, there's a couple other that I'm forgetting right now, but it goes out, it's quite a bit. And so we all got together as a group, kind of looked at, essentially after we finished up our report, we had 3 different working groups as part of that effort that was being led by the state and CDOT, to have a governance committee, an operations committee, and a finance committee. And the goal of that was to produce a report that was due on March 1st. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to read that from the group or not, but that was kind of a plan of how this might actually work towards a joint service coming to fruition. So put together kind of the framework about how that would be arranged. In general, it's looking at IGAs, intergovernmental agreements between all the different parties to kind of figure out how we can split costs, split operations, operate the lines, et cetera, in a joint manner. One thing I would say is that it's a bit of a blend between what commuter rail is and what peak service is. So it's peak service, we had 6 stations. They have, what we're looking at for the joint services, 8 stations total, which includes Fort Collins, Longmont, Loveland, and I'm missing one. Fort Collins, Longmont, Loveland, Boulder, and then in between, maybe up to 3 of the RTD stations. So the issue being that if we put too many stations in, it kind of tips the scales to be more commuter rail instead of inner city rail. And one of the funding issues right now is most of the discretionary funds, as far as grants go in particular, are really available for inner city rail or freight. There's not a lot right now available for commuter rail. So that's one of the reasons why we want to try to keep that into the still defined as an inner city rail definition. But that really concludes that part. I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions on that one as well. And I will introduce Keith Hall, who's was also part of our Northwest Rail team, and together we should be able to answer any questions that you have, I hope.
So everybody's asking when are we going to get this?
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell them.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what to tell them?
Well, good question. I think it's a good question. And, and if it's RTD alone, I think the projection is roughly 25 years. If it's a joint service, the Senate Bill 184 is talking about having a joint service up by 2029. So another benefit, I think, and advantage of looking at a joint service potential.
So the other thing that I get asked all the time, and I'm sure everybody else does too, when, and we've been paying into this, how much has Longmont, Boulder, Westminster, Lafayette, how much have they contributed to this project already?
I don't know those numbers right off. I don't know that we really, Phil, I think you might have them for Longmont. I think you told me last time. I don't have a breakdown of all those specific numbers for that.
Because you're looking for $650 million, right, for the project?
If we're doing, if peak service were to try to move forward, yeah. Joint service, like I said, is a little bit different. It's the concept being using some of RTD's internal savings account, Fast Track's internal savings account, which is the FISA, which I think we have about $190 million in there. The state is also, as part of Senate Bill 230, there's a rental car fee, which will add money from a state perspective, and Senate Bill 230, which is an oil and gas, also has additional contributions in there. So, plus the CTIO has more bonding capacity than we do currently right now as well. So, it's really looking at a combination of funds to try to do that, rather than RTD trying to come up with that entire amount.
I would suggest, if you'd like more information on that, there was a April 1st, not April Fool's Day, but it was, April 1st meeting at council where the governor's staff presented. First thing on the docket was that presentation about all those different costs that go into how they're pulling from RTD's different sets of dollars or different buckets of money. And of course, RTD would have to approve that. And then the different state buckets that Patrick's talking about as well. So Lisa Kaufman did a great presentation that shows how all those monies can come together and make it a reality by 2029. But things have to fall into place just right.
Sure. Because, Google searching, may or may not be right, but, give or take $100 million from Longmont, 250 from Boulder. I don't know the other ones, the other cities, but people are getting antsy. 2004 is when this, was first brought up. And people are wanting to know when they're going to see it. They've been paying into it, and they're getting antsy. And to echo some of the other comments is Longmont feels left out.
That's fair. Sure. Understand.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I kind of have a more nuanced question. Just because I read a lot of reports from around the world, the U.S. always spends way more on rail than any other country in the world, and we get the least amount of output. We could easily say it's because of public comments, it's because of environmental studies, blah, blah, blah. That's a too simplistic answer, in my opinion. And I would like to point you to, if you already know about it, the Transit Cost Project. You just find it at transitcost.com. It's a bunch of researchers that look at comparing these other rail projects around our country to countries that actually do it well and much cheaper, from Spain to Sweden to Netherlands, etc. And what I found by reading a lot of that is because they standardized a lot of things. They standardized what a station looks like. They standardize the stairs, the rails, they use precast concrete because it's cheaper and not labor intensive. I don't know if in this country we have a lot of manufacturing of precast concrete, but so it's just how to bring that, like what I'm seeing, $320 million for infrastructure improvements. How can we bring that down? And I would encourage, transitcosts.com, read some of their academic reports.
Sure.
To figure out how to bring our costs down so that we actually get an output. Because like Spain was building Barcelona, they built a whole transit network for their city, and they got stations down to under 10 million. And it's like, seems impossible here. Our average, I think, is in the hundreds.
For stations?
Yeah. Yep.
Our estimate on this, our stations were somewhere between $5 and $8 million apiece.
Okay. No, I'm talking about like a full-on modern hub station where you have multiple transits coming to that.
Okay.
So, I just want a little bit more research on why this country always just builds expensive projects, and it takes us 20 years.
Fair. Okay. What was that called again?
Transitcosts.com.
Transitcosts.com. Okay.
It's all academic journals.
All right.
So if I'm understanding correctly, your train sets, you're going to have 5 cars. Is that right?
5 train sets total. So each one at a minimum would be a locomotive, a cab car, and a coach and a cab car. If it's possible, depending on the ridership and whatnot, we could have kind of maybe 2 coach cars and a cab car. But that's what the price was based on.
Okay. I'm just wondering, because I don't know how many people you can put in a coach, but obviously there's a maximum you can put in a coach. And even with 2, is there as time goes on, the station's obviously going to be a length of some kind that will only accommodate so many coaches. So is there kind of forward thinking, like, okay, in 10 years or however long it is, when ridership has got to a certain level, then we'll add an extra coach, and we'll already have done the infrastructure to accommodate that. So like that forward planning of like, this is going to be well utilized, but we kind of got to get to that point. Is that some
what we've done on previous projects, like what we did on the commuter rail corridors, the ABG and N, is we have a criteria in there that the track geometry at least can accommodate a platform extension. So we may not put the platform extension in now. Sometimes that becomes an attractive nuisance sometimes if you're not actually utilizing a piece of infrastructure. People kind of mess with it sometimes. So, but that way at least you don't have to go back and do, change your fiber and your track and your, turnouts and, all that sort of stuff. It's really just it's a matter of doing the physical concrete part of it. In that, we did a little bit of that on some of the light rail, corridors. I haven't done it quite yet on the commuter rail. It's a little bit more complicated on commuter rail because it's high level boarding, which is also, by the way, I should say what we recommend for this particular corridor as well, level boarding. So it's a little bit more complicated of a construction, but it's still easier than changing the track.
Okay. And following on from Board Member Wickland's comments about that bigger studies, how much have you consulted with other municipalities, and not only within the US, but with other countries who have been doing these types of networks for decades and have obviously extensive experience? Like how much have you kind of consulted with those outside people?
No, we didn't do a terrible amount of that. I think on this particular one, we do use the help me remember, it's the transit database. National Transit Database for a fair amount of our information, which all the transit agencies can report into, and that does give us a pretty fair idea. Our consultant works with transit agencies kind of all across the country. They're the ones that actually put the cost estimate together for us, so they have a pretty good feel for costs. And by the way, on the Europe, I can't speak to the conditions of what's in Europe compared to what we have here in the U.S. as far as labor pools and cost of materials and a lot of different things. And at least right now we can look at that and see. I don't know that we'll be able to change that environment necessarily here in the U.S., but where we are. But it would be interesting. I am kind of curious to read about that.
It just seems like maybe talking to some of these people who've been doing it for a really long time and getting some of their experience and perspectives would be a good way forward to try and bring down some of these costs, and like having those conversations with, I'm sure there's people that have your position but in other countries that you could talk to, that you could have those types of conversations with and really try and figure out how do we make it happen sooner and for less cost, because 25 years is just basically, it might as well be 50 years. I mean, it's just a number that's going to keep getting pushed out. So that's 5 years, yes, that's much more reasonable, but 25, you might as well say we're not going to do it for most people because they've already been waiting 25 years. So another 25 years, they're never going to do it. So talking to people who have actually got to that finishing point.
Well, one thing I would say just a little bit, like Eagle as an example was actually an international. We had a lot of international folks on there, a lot of Europe folks. In fact, Eagle was the AB and G line, the Penta Plus, the public-private partnership. So they brought a lot of expertise in there. So I don't think, at least as far as the American environment, I don't know that we're super far off. They actually, in fact, set up the structure of the public-private partnership based on more European models, actually, when they did that. So it's not like RTD hasn't kind of done some of that. I don't know. I'm not, like I said, we kind of base it on what we've seen here in this country from the industry. And like, I would be very curious to see what other countries are doing, but that's true. We do have a lot of FRA requirements and regulations and ADA and a bunch of other things like that some countries don't necessarily have.
Yeah,
but
I think they have to build safety. All these passenger rail have to be able to basically meet crash requirements basically always crashing into a freight train of some kind. You know, it has to have that same safety capacity as a freight train, basically, and I don't think Europe and Asia have the same requirements as far as that. So it goes back to meeting requirements of this country, which, like it or not, is kind of what we have to meet.
That doesn't mean we can't learn from other folks, though.
Yeah.
So it's a good comment. So.
Thank you.
Sure. Sure.
Well, thank you for the presentation.
All right.
So I was wondering, are there plans to restore the LX, and if so, when? No, that might be more.
I'm going to have to kick it to one of the other folks here. I know this is the full comment question
I do.
period. So.
Yeah.
We have proposed. We usually I don't need a microphone. We have proposed reinstating that in September. Okay, so that currently that is 3 southbound trips in the morning, 3 northbound trips in the peak period in the afternoon. So, fingers crossed. It's been something. I've been on top of tables trying to get that back for like 3 years now. So hopefully it'll come to fruition.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm also wondering, with the reimagining project, there's still many bus stops around Longmont that still display some inactive routes. Is there a plan to update the signs so that we know, like the J is not currently active, or are you just holding on to that for?
So normally what will happen is if we change a route, so in other words, with this BRT change that we're doing, the signs will be relabeled. So any stops that are currently, any stop signs that are not being used, let's say on that orange pattern over on the west side, those shouldn't reflect anything. We'll probably leave the sign in place, just remove any labeling or cover any labeling. What happens is if we completely remove a stop, if we want to reinstate that stop later, it has to be ADA compliant. So we don't like to pull stops out, because then it can get real expensive later on if we decide to change something back. So
yeah. Also, with the reimagining, is there talks of having just clearer understandings of where the directions of the bus are going? Like, for instance, like the 324 says either Grandview for like the south side, and then like Park Ridge for north side, and even like longtime residents don't know like where those places are.
In some ways, it'll be easier because the destination on the south end, as far as the main destination, will be First and Main.
Okay.
North end will be Park Ridge in Maine. So some of the outlying ones might be a little more difficult to parse, but usually on our destination sign, we usually don't do directional. Just the end destination, where did that bus end up? So could we change something like that if it was necessary? But it usually when people know that they're going to Park Ridge in Maine, they know they're going northbound.
Yeah.
They're going to First in Maine, they know they're going southbound.
I've just had enough conversations where I've had to educate people on it, and if nothing else, it'd be nice to see more maps like publicly displayed. I think that'd be a huge help. Yeah.
Shelter boards inside the shelter boards.
Yeah, maybe
and stuff.
inside the shelter boards, and then also inside the coffin, well, like the Roosevelt area, just like anywhere where there's a major hub or like a endpoint, I think would be helpful.
We currently post a lot of shelter boards in our main locations. Some of that is based on, do we have a shelter board there?
Yeah.
Or a shelter there?
I think that's part of. Yeah,
Yeah.
the eighth and broths it makes it, that's what, part of the complications, and I think that adds to some of the confusion, because since my eighth and broths, like the number of I've had to have just quite a few interactions with people that just seem really lost, and so
And there again, putting in infrastructure for what we feel is a temporary situation. We hope to be utilizing Kaufman in September. And so we're kind of waiting to see construction, I was just over there today, and what our ability will be to get back over to Maine until Kaufman's all the way through. And so I was over there before the meeting, just looking at, okay, what kind of maneuvers can a bus make? So, I mean, just looking, so even if we decide, oh, we're just going to store buses over on Bross for now, and they'll start at 8th and Kaufman, making that right-hand turn from Kaufman onto Longs Peak is going to be almost impossible for a bus to do. So a lot of the reconstruction hasn't been built so the buses can maneuver off of Kaufman very well. And that's by design. Make it safer for pedestrians, make it safer for bicyclists. So we're going to have to try to figure out what can we do between now and when that corridor is completed to start utilizing the infrastructure that's been paid for.
Fair.
And part of that is shelters with shelter boards and
yeah, and hopefully it is really just like a temporary nuisance. So, I mean, yeah, I can't wait for us to go back to Kaufman. I'm also wondering, is there talks about Ride Longmont and Flex Ride merging as a partner? Or like, how feasible is that?
That's not something that I've heard of or familiar
No.
with. That would probably be a conversation to have with Aaron Vallejos and also with Corey Schmidt, who does the partnership program.
So he was saying we could talk to two folks at RTD for a partnership program just to get it onto we do record it, so that's just why we're having people come to the mic, is it does end up on the video, but we can have those conversations. We're pushing people to use the Flex Ride whenever they want to do a subscription type service.
Yeah.
And so we're really trying to get people to understand that there's Via Mobility as well that provides great services for people with disabilities and older adults. So we're asking folks to use that service, the Flex, and Ride Longmont. So we're trying to get people to use all three of these services to get more of that on-demand service through Longmont.
Awesome. And currently, like when you search the Longmont Ride Free Fare program on RTD's website, it still lists like outdated routes like JLX, and it also has the old price structure. Is there someone that can update the website?
I'll make a note of that and get a hold of people internally.
Okay.
To see, make sure that that's been updated. Sometimes with like the J, it hasn't been officially
eliminated. So I could
so
see
you
like
gotta-
why keeping that on there, but the price structure needs to be updated.
Yeah, no, I'll reach out to.
Great. And then I'm just almost done here, I swear. What since your last visit, like staff retention was a major problem, and so I was wondering how things are looking this year.
We're doing very, very well, and I don't have the exact numbers, but we have pretty much hit our goal of how many drivers that we want to have. And now, obviously, we always constantly hire. But there again, we're hesitant to, there's two things that are going on with adding service is all the rail replacement that's been going on in Denver. And if anybody has ridden one of those trains down there, it's rather frustrating. But we have to have available operators to do the bus bridges, and hopefully we'll be out of the woods with the major reconstruction other than downtown rail replacement project, which has been put off. And then there again, we look at how many operators are available on any given day, and by that means, who's out on OJI, how many's out on FMLA, how many's just called in sick every day. And our operations department's a lot better clued into that information than what I am. So we are doing a lot better. We are at it, like there again, the LX, it looks like, we can, 2-3 years ago, we couldn't even look at. Another thing that goes into, and I'll just bring this up into adding service is it has to go through a Title VI process. And so sometimes we may want to add service, but if we're not balancing that with underserved areas, or if we're, so like the LX is obviously it's high demographic, majority white. Yeah. So we have to balance that kind of addition with making sure that we're not taking service or possible services away from lower demographics. So that also goes into when we add service. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate that, and hearing just kind of the process of what it takes and why sometimes it feels like it takes quite a while. But that's all I have. Thank you for taking on so many questions, Greg.
Yeah.
I know, it's a surprise. I have another question. Have you been considering in your long-term plans, e-bikes are being used more and more, but they cannot ride on RTD buses right now. They're just too heavy for the racks at the front. With more and more people using them every day and wanting to use them as that first and last mile kind of bridge, is there any thoughts about what RTD is going to do to kind of help those people the increasing number of people who have e-bikes?
That is a little bit out of my purview. It's something that can be brought up. And I'm not even sure who, would that just be like operations? Because they're the ones that, they would be the ones that would deal with, because there's really, so like an e-bike, you can hop on a train with an e-bike. And that's not an issue. So we used to have an issue with batteries. We did not like batteries on buses. It just was. But now that we have, lithium ion and stuff like that, buses, scooters are allowed on buses now, either stowed below. So if you're riding one of the coaches, the biggest problem that I've seen with e-bikes is the rack up front. It lifted the amount of weight that they have, and I don't know if we're building or what the options are for a stout enough bike rack.
And Greg, I can give you a spec more.
Okay.
We do allow e-bikes, however, there's a weight limit. I want to say it's 40 pounds, and a lot of them are, in fact, heavier than that, but we do, and also on a limited basis, we do allow the e-bikes. The problem is, as Greg was alluding to, you're switching out all of our racks and finding a rack that would be suitable for allowing so much a bigger weight. It's just not something we've been able to prioritize for the time being. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I want to thank all of our RTD presenters for this evening's information. My question, I think, is best directed to you, Mr. Filkin. We saw earlier that ridership in Longmont has decreased pretty substantially for the most recent year for which you have data. My question is, has RTD ridership system-wide increased since RTD lowered its fares?
I don't have like the latest annual ridership numbers. And so anything I say will be anecdotal I think that. Okay, here's the guy.
It's been somewhat of a mixed bag. We've seen higher bus ridership, but we've seen lower rail ridership, and what we're attributing that to is all of the construction work that has been going on in the light rail. So a lot of our light rail ridership has plummeted. So all in all, it's been even, but our bus ridership overall has gone up quite a bit. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Phil, we don't have any action items. At least that I see.
We do not.
All right.
This is it.
Okay. I guess we'll go with comments from board members. I'll start on that end over there.
This is very informative. This is always my favorite meeting of the year, so I appreciate the time. But though, yeah, I'll leave it at that. And one thing I wanted to bring light to, Ride Longmont app. It makes suggested bus routes that someone can take if it's not if your ride is not available. But it only currently is suggesting flex, which is against the against RTD's contract. Like flex can't actually take intermodal people within the city, and so that needs to be updated. But that is all I have.
Well, too bad RTD already left. Yeah, they're quick to leave.
I gave them.
All right.
I kind of gave them the.
No, it was great. It's always a fun time. This is my third time with RTD, and it's always been entertaining. So it was a great meeting. Thank you.
I don't have a ton of comments really. I feel like I've talked a lot today. I always have lots of comments for RTD. So yeah, it was a good meeting. It's good hearing about progress. I'm glad that they're actually increasing routes, which I don't think we've heard. I've never heard from RTD in a long time, so that's really great to hear. Maybe one day Longmont will have an amazing bus network. Probably not though, but we can always dream.
I also appreciated the RTD update. Phil, at one point it looked like you were going to give us an updated total amount of what Longmont has contributed towards fast tracks. Did you come up with a number? I think last year you said it was 220 million.
Oh no, it was 91 million last year. So with
no, I mean to date.
That's fast tracks.
Okay,
from the city of Longmont, from the fast tracks collection, which is at 0.4%.
Yeah.
Of the 1% total. So 0.6 goes to the base system of RTD. 0.4% goes to fast tracks. Alex is right on the nose, really, of about 100 million collected to date since 2005, when the tax first started being collected, January 1st, 2005.
Great.
And I don't have the latest numbers. My CFO retired right before I asked for those numbers, and so but they run about $8 to $9 million a year. So with that puts us right at the $100 million mark.
Got it.
This was a great meeting, very informative. One day we'll get our train, and one day we'll get our bus to the airport. I will continue to advocate for a bus to the airport, because not everybody, but a lot of people do travel to the airport, and it requires a car or 2.5 hour commute with several connections, and it's just not equitable to assume that everybody can have a car. So trying to expand that, and then also expanding our ridership to Denver would be great. I did like to see that we are increasing service, so that is great. So I do applaud RTD for that. So thank you all.
I'll go and then, I think tonight was informative. I guess at the end of this, I think the board members that weren't able to make it from RTD probably would have been a more appropriate audience for some of the questions and comments that were made, because these are worker bees and they're just doing, I don't want to say what they're told, but they're doing the best they can. And so they're not going to be able to make many of the changes that we would like to see. I think that's probably from a much higher level. But all in all, I think it was a good meeting, great questions from everybody, and staying engaged. And I will hand it over to Councilmember Yarborough.
Thank you. Yes, you all had some amazing questions, and again, we'll see what happens. For me, it's just kind of hard I don't understand, like, if you create it, you make it, you build it, they'll come, right? We need it. And, really, the only thing I have to say is the mayor and I went back to Chino, Japan. That's why we weren't here. I was here last Tuesday, but the Tuesday before, well, I haven't been here almost the whole month of March. But our sister city, Chino, has a ride Longmont, but a ride Chino. That's not what they call it. But before us, they had it since 2022. So it was pretty cool to see that they had already implemented microtransit within a 55,000 population city before we did. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And the other thing that I didn't notice the last time I was there, I don't know why I didn't notice this, but the setbacks from where the cars are, from where the pedestrians walk, is really far. I didn't count how many feet or anything. I wish we did that here in the United States. If you're able to, and I should have taken a picture, but if you're able to look at some of the streets in Japan, especially Tokyo, the setback from where the cars stop at the light is really far back. And, that's part of Vision Zero. That's something that I think if we could implement something like that, I felt safer crossing the street, even though it's a busy city, Tokyo, because they're so far, and I was like, why we don't do that in the U.S., right? Last thing, the bike racks were pretty cool. They're at an angle, and they mount up on one another on the sidewalk, which you still have, the pedestrians still have plenty room. With the bikes in the bike rack, there was still plenty of room for all the people to walk on the streets. And so I thought that was an interesting way to have it. You have one bike that's locked in, and then attached to it is another bike rack, but it's lower. So one was up and the other one was lower. And I was like, genius. Why we don't do that too? So I got to go back to Japan to see what else I come up with. No, I'm just playing. Anyway, so that was my trip and all that, which is you too, Phil, right? But no, great questions tonight. Let's see what happens, and let's actually let's do our part and make sure the community know about May 5th and May 6th. That's very, very important. And also when it's time to open up for community comments about the stops, we need to make sure that we put it out there that people can have input. Because all of this is part of Vision Zero too. We want to make sure people have accessibility to go where they need to go, because if they put all this infrastructure in for BRT and people are still complaining that they can't, it's too far or it's not where most of the people are, And also I just looked up when he talked about Title VI, they're actually updating that right now. And there's a community engagement May Anyway, it's in May. Look it up. I'm sorry, I should have wrote it down. But Title VI is being updated in the month of May as well. So they're also looking for community input on that, making sure there are equitable practices with RTD and what they're doing as well. So we have a lot of community engagement to inform our people, our city. They have the power, they have the voice to create change. And if, I hate to say this, but what they say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's right. So anyway, thank you all.
One follow-up. Phil, could you make the slide deck from tonight's presentation available to us? Can you send us a link?
Will do, yes.
Thanks.
Okay, so Phil, do we have the upcoming agenda for May items that you want to discuss, or?
Well, we
not?
do have one item that I forgot to mention in items from staff, and that's the idea that we need to fill at least one board member seat. So in May, we'll be asking you for your recommendation for maybe two? Yes. So typically in May is when we start doing the interview process so that we can be done in June and then get that to the city council so they can make their final determination on who board members for that July meeting. So July, we're supposed to have everything done, wrapped up by July 1st. So we don't know yet. Yeah. Friday. So that's one item we'll definitely have. And then I failed to check what else was coming up, but we have more items coming. I think Vision Zero is one of those pieces. We can do more for microtransit. That's coming up. But I think this kind of schedule change with RTD kind of played with us a little bit. So we'll make sure we're back on track here.
Okay, great. So with that, if I could get a motion to adjourn, we can adjourn. He's jumping up and down.
A motion to adjourn the April 14th Transportation Advisory Board meeting.
Do we get a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. It's a wrap.